Josh Harris was once celebrated as the proud son carrying forward his father's legendary name in the world of crab fishing. As the son of the late Captain Phil Harris from Deadliest Catch, Josh quickly became a familiar face to millions of viewers who admired his grit, charm, and determination to keep his father's legacy alive. However, behind the fame, ocean adventures, and the strong family name, there was a darker story quietly waiting to surface. Years later, shocking revelations would turn that admiration into outrage, and the man once seen as a symbol of resilience faced the painful collapse of everything he had built. So, what really happened to Josh Harris from Deadliest Catch? Let's explore the story of his legacy, his rise, and the turning points that defined his journey. When people hear the name Harris in connection with Deadliest Catch, they instantly think of grit, wild storms, and a legacy filled with both inspiration and tragedy. But to truly understand Josh Harris's rise, one must first go back to his father, Captain Phil Harris, the man whose life on the sea shaped not only his sons, but also the entire identity of the show itself. Phil Harris was born on December 19, 1956, in Bothell, Washington. From a very young age, the sea called to him. At only 8 years old, he joined his father on fishing trips, learning firsthand the rhythms, hardships, and dangers of life on the open water. After high school, he fully committed himself to crab fishing. By the age of 21, Phil had already achieved what few could, becoming one of the youngest crab boat captains in the treacherous Bering Sea. Over the decades, Captain Phil commanded the FV Cornelia Marie. Turning it into more than just a vessel, it became his pride, his symbol, and his stage. On Deadliest Catch, Phil's larger-than-life personality immediately captured viewers' hearts. He was rough around the edges, smoked constantly, and never shied away from speaking his mind. Yet beneath the brashness and the flaws was a raw honesty that made him relatable. Fans saw him as a captain who truly cared about his crew and his family. Off the boat, his life was just as intense, filled with motorcycles, marriages, parties, and personal highs and lows. Still, no matter how chaotic things got, Phil always remained devoted to his sons. In 2008, Phil launched a coffee brand called Captain's Reserve Coffee, featuring blends tied to fishing themes, including one named the Harris Family Blend. This was his attempt to transform fame into a lasting legacy that his sons could build upon. Everything seemed to be going well, but tragedy struck during the filming of Season 6 of Deadliest Catch. On January 29, 2010, while unloading a pileo crab on St. Paul Island, Alaska, Phil suffered a severe stroke. Crew members and producers were shocked but acted quickly, rushing him to Anchorage for surgery. Doctors placed him in an induced coma to reduce brain swelling, and for a brief moment, hope returned when he woke up, able to speak and even squeeze his son's hands. His recovery seemed miraculous, but sadly, just days later, Phil suffered an intracranial hemorrhage and passed away on February 9, 2010. At the age of 53, Phil's death sent shockwaves through the fishing community and Deadliest Catch fandom alike. The producers honored him through emotional tribute episodes that captured both the crew's grief and the profound silence left by his absence. Episodes such as Blown Off Course and Redemption Day showcased the heartbreak of those closest to him. For viewers, Phil wasn't just a TV personality. They felt as though they had lost someone they truly knew. For his sons, Josh and Jake Harris, the pain was even more personal and impossible to escape. Phil had married his first wife, Mary Harris, in 1982, and together they had 2 sons, Josh and Jake, before divorcing in 1991. Growing up, the boys were surrounded by the smell of salt water, the sound of engines, and their father's thunderous personality. On Deadliest Catch, both sons worked on the Cornelia Marie, starting as deckhands and learning every aspect of the trade. The cameras captured their struggles, laughter, and occasional clashes as they learned under their father's stern yet loving guidance. When Phil died, the brothers suddenly found themselves in the spotlight, facing immense pressure to live up to the Harris legacy. Becoming a captain is one thing, but carrying a legendary name is another. The Cornelia Marie had long been associated with Phil's strength and charisma, and the public wasn't sure whether his sons could ever match that energy. Every move they made was under scrutiny, and every mistake was compared to what their father might have done differently. In interviews, Josh admitted how heavy that burden felt. He constantly tried to honor Phil's memory while also developing his own leadership style, a balance that was never easy to maintain. Over time, Josh began to rise in his own right. Alongside his fishing partner, Casey McManus, he purchased the Cornelia Marie and stepped into a leadership role as co-captain. His confidence grew with every season, earning him respect from his crew and the audience alike. In 2020, Josh took a new direction with Deadliest Catch Bloodline, a spin-off series that followed him to Hawaii. The show's premise revolved around Josh discovering his father's old Hawaiian fishing charts and notes while refitting the Cornelia Marie. Intrigued, he and Casey traveled to Hawaii's Kona coast to uncover Phil's mysterious past there. Local fisherman Jeff Silva joined them, adding authenticity and local insight to their journey. Bloodline quickly became a hit for its mix of adventure, discovery, and emotional storytelling. Viewers loved seeing Josh chase his father's legacy across warm tropical waters instead of the icy Alaskan seas. Across 3 seasons, Josh built his own identity, showing that he wasn't just Phil's son, but a man determined to explore his father's untold stories. Fans saw him handle storms, technical failures, crew disputes, and even fishing restrictions like the shutdown of the Red King crab fishery. Through all of it, he earned admiration for his composure and resilience. To many, Josh had truly become the rightful heir to the Harris name. But with admiration also came judgment. Some viewers began to question whether Josh was preserving his father's memory or exploiting it for fame. Still, there was no denying that Bloodline kept the Harris story alive and gave audiences a fresh perspective. However, beneath the surface of fame and television success, Josh's personal life carried troubling shadows. It all traced back to a deeply disturbing incident from 1998, when Josh was only around 15 or 16 years old. That year, serious allegations surfaced accusing him of sexually mistreating a 4-year-old girl. Because the case involved minors on both sides, much of it remained sealed and out of public discussion for many years. But later, when old court documents resurfaced, they painted a dark picture. In 1999, Josh Harris was reportedly arrested and charged after DNA results allegedly linked him to the assault. Eventually, instead of facing the full sexual assault charge, he pleaded guilty to lesser counts, specifically 4th-degree assault and immoral communication with a minor. According to reports, his sentence included 9 months of confinement and a mandatory psychosexual evaluation. For years, this part of Josh's past remained largely unknown to the public. But when the information reemerged decades later, it changed everything. The once beloved fisherman and reality TV star, admired for his determination and resilience, now faced public outrage, the loss of his reputation, and the unraveling of the Harris legacy that he had spent years trying to protect. Years later, in a 2019 Washington Court of Appeals decision, the courts once again examined the appeals related to Josh Harris's earlier charges, which included attempted RPE of a child and communication with a minor. The court ultimately upheld the convictions, reasoning that there was sufficient evidence to support them. To be clear, the court concluded that the evidence was strong enough to sustain Harris's convictions for attempted 3rd-degree rape and communication with a minor. However, even back then, many began to question the way this case was handled. The reduction in charges and the plea deal seemed to suggest that the case was far more complicated and opaque than anyone realized, particularly since Josh was a juvenile at the time. This led to one lingering question that persisted for years. How exactly was such a serious case kept hidden from the public for so long? To understand that, it's essential to recognize that multiple interlocking factors kept this case in the shadows. First and foremost, Josh was a minor when the incidents occurred, and as a result, much of the legal record was sealed or restricted from public view. This wasn't because he was the child of a well-known figure, but rather because juvenile cases are almost always protected to prevent lifelong stigma for young offenders. Another significant reason was the plea to lesser charges. By pleading guilty to reduced offenses instead of facing a full sexual assault conviction, many of the disturbing details never had to be publicly aired in court. The final charges, ass and immoral communication, were far less sensational in legal terms, making it much easier for the case to fade quietly into court archives. Additionally, back in 1999, Josh was not yet a television personality. There was no public spotlight, limited media coverage, and social media did not exist in the way it does today. With little public interest, the case could easily be resolved quietly without scrutiny. On top of that, some of the more serious allegations may have later been affected by the statute of limitations, or simply too difficult to prosecute due to problems with evidence, witnesses, and the passage of time. Even when Josh eventually became a familiar face through Deadliest Catch, little to no information surfaced about his past. That's because when networks conducted background checks, sealed juvenile records would not have appeared, or they were perhaps overlooked entirely. This allowed Josh to build a successful public image for more than 2 decades, viewed by fans simply as a hard-working fisherman and captain, not a man burdened by a dark secret. However, as time went on, other legal troubles and personal issues began to surface. Though not all were directly tied to Josh, they cast a long shadow over the Harris family name. The first and perhaps most serious were DUI convictions. A Washington Supreme Court decision revealed that Josh had 2 prior convictions for driving under the influence, one in Seattle Municipal Court in 2001 and another in Renton, both dating back decades. This revelation made many fans question his sincerity and character. The doubts deepened in 2011 when a U.S. Department of Justice press release reported that a man named Joshua Harris had pleaded guilty to transporting individuals, including a minor, across state lines for sexual activity and prostitution. Although it was never confirmed that this was the same Josh Harris from Deadliest Catch, the similarity in name and timing caused widespread speculation and concern. The Harris family's public image was further tarnished when Josh's younger brother, Jake Harris, faced his own string of legal issues. Jake was arrested multiple times for DUI, hit and run, and drug possession charges. In 2017, he was even arrested in Phoenix for possession of methamphetamine and Xanax. These repeated incidents only intensified the public's skepticism toward the family, fueling gossip and suspicion online. As technology and social media became widespread, rumors, blog posts, and online theories about the Harris family multiplied, keeping the speculation alive even without solid proof, until the 1998 case finally resurfaced, carrying a secret as grave as Josh's alleged crime can lead to deep emotional and psychological conflict. Over the years, he may have tried to suppress, rationalize, or compartmentalize his past, which could have caused anxiety, avoidance, and difficulty trusting others. Fame only magnified that internal turmoil. The higher he climbed, the more he feared that the truth might one day come to light. This burden could have influenced his behavior, relationships, and decision-making. His legal troubles, such as the DUIs, may even reflect stress-induced impulsivity or self-destructive tendencies often seen in those burdened by guilt or shame. Publicly, there were also subtle signs of unease. In interviews or appearances, Josh sometimes appeared defensive or evasive whenever rumors crept too close. Crew members on Deadliest Catch recalled frequent emotional outbursts and conflicts, perhaps hinting at deeper internal struggles. Interestingly, during the filming of Deadliest Catch Bloodline, when exploring his late father Phil's legacy, Josh showed moments of vulnerability, a possible reflection of a lifelong tension between revealing and concealing his true self. Eventually, the secret could no longer stay buried. In 2022, decades after the original case, court documents and investigative reporting resurfaced, alleging that a teenage Josh Harris had sexually assaulted a 4-year-old child in 1998. Initially, reports did not explicitly name Josh, but social media and news outlets soon connected the dots, and the story spread rapidly. Radar Online was one of the first outlets to break the news publicly, reporting that the Discovery Channel had decided to cut ties with Josh Harris after becoming aware of the allegations. Discovery responded swiftly, confirming that Josh would no longer appear in future episodes of Deadliest Catch. The network also began removing the spin-off series Deadliest Catch, Bloodline, from its platforms, erasing it from streaming services and online listings. The third season, which had aired in 2022, was quickly canceled. By season 19, Josh Harris was completely gone from the show, and his family's iconic vessel, the Cornelia Marie, disappeared from the lineup altogether. This wasn't just an edit. It symbolized the end of the Harris legacy on Deadliest Catch. The sudden disappearance of Cornelia Marie, once a centerpiece of the show, felt to many fans like the erasure of an entire era. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Fans flooded social media with outrage, confusion, and heartbreak. Many felt betrayed after years of supporting Josh and his family, while others struggled to reconcile the man they admired with the shocking revelations. Major news outlets published editorials questioning Discovery's handling of the situation. Some argued the network should have acted sooner or vetted its stars more thoroughly, while others believed it had done the right thing by cutting ties immediately. The conversation broadened to larger ethical questions. Should juvenile records remain sealed when the individual becomes a public figure? Can a person's youthful crimes ever be truly separated from their adult achievements? Through it all, Josh Harris remained silent. His only indirect acknowledgement came through an IMDb statement noting that the Cornelia Marie was not optioned for the new season, a vague, passive remark that ignored the allegations entirely. His silence left fans divided, with some interpreting it as an admission and others as legal restraint. For Discovery, there was no turning back. The network chose to distance itself completely, quietly editing out scenes and removing Bloodline's presence from its official platforms. The once celebrated Harris name became synonymous with scandal, and Phil Harris's legacy, once a story of perseverance and father-son inspiration, was tragically overshadowed. By 2022, the past had finally caught up with Josh Harris. The hidden story that had stayed buried for over 2 decades collided with his public life, dismantling everything he had built. His career, reputation, and public identity were all destroyed almost overnight. Deadliest Catch continues to this day, but without Josh, without Cornelia Marie, and without the legacy that once defined it. The Harris era, marked by fame, family pride, and painful secrets, has come to an end, leaving behind a trail of pain, betrayal, and shattered trust for both the family and the millions of fans who once looked up to them. On the surface, it may have seemed that the only thing Josh Harris lost was his spot on television and the public platform that came with it. But in truth, what he lost was far deeper and far more personal. For years, Josh had lived under the bright lights of fame, carrying the proud yet heavy weight of the Harris legacy. Being part of Deadliest Catch wasn't just a job, it was part of who he was. So when Discovery decided to cut ties with him and remove him from the show, it wasn't merely a professional setback, it was a painful separation from a huge part of his identity. The loss was devastating and layered with emotional and psychological cost. The solid reputation that once anchored his career began to crumble. Bonds built on loyalty, trust, and mutual respect, with producers, crewmates, sponsors, and devoted fans, fractured under the strain of controversy. Although Josh's mental health following his removal has not been publicly documented, many who have faced similar public scandals have spoken about how such experiences can lead to immense psychological strain. Feelings of shame, anxiety, and isolation often follow, and that seems to be exactly what Josh went through. His silence after the allegations surfaced spoke volumes. It suggested a deliberate retreat from the spotlight, perhaps a way to protect whatever remained of his personal life and inner peace. But what has Josh been doing since all this unfolded? The answer, surprisingly, is almost nothing concrete. There has been little reliable information about his life after Deadliest Catch. Reports confirm that he hasn't returned to the series since 2022, with his last known appearance being in season 18. After that, it's as if he quietly disappeared from the public eye. For those who once worked with Josh, or those who admired his story and saw in him the continuation of his father, Phil Harris's legacy, the scandal forced a difficult reckoning. Many began to question what they thought they knew about the Harris family. What once symbolized perseverance and pride became overshadowed by controversy, leaving Phil's legacy fractured and the family deeply affected. When a beloved public figure faces accusations of this magnitude, the emotional response from fans is often immediate and intense. Shock, disbelief, and heartbreak rippled through the fan base. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions. People saying things like, "I can't believe this," or "He seemed so genuine." For many, this wasn't just about a celebrity being exposed. It was personal. Viewers had watched Josh grow up on screen, facing challenges and triumphs, learning from his father and carving his own path. They didn't just watch him, they rooted for him. That emotional investment made the revelations even more painful. To see someone you believed in suddenly connected to such disturbing allegations felt like a personal betrayal. It wasn't just disappointment. It disrupted the emotional story fans had built around him. The internal shift from "I admired him" to "I can't believe this" created guilt, anger, and confusion. The tragedy of Josh Harris's story is multidimensional. It's not just about one man's downfall. It's about the collapse of trust, the betrayal of innocence, and the breaking of an unspoken bond between viewers and the person they believed they knew. In Deadliest Catch, tragedy usually comes in the form of nature's wrath, raging storms, freezing waters, capsizing vessels, or deadly frostbite. But this tragedy was entirely different. It wasn't a physical danger, it was a moral one. You can see a storm approaching, you can prepare for the waves, but no one could have seen this kind of storm coming. The threat was hidden in the past, buried in legal files and youthful decisions that only later came to light. When the truth finally surfaced, the impact was far deeper than any storm. It wasn't a battle against nature, but against the reality of human imperfection. At its core, this story is also one of betrayal. Viewers trusted Josh Harris as the hardworking son of a legendary captain, carrying forward a legacy of determination and resilience. That trust has now become fragile, and the sense of betrayal layered and complex. The platform that once elevated him, Discovery's Deadliest Catch, also magnified his fall. His story serves as a harsh reminder that the public images we admire are often carefully curated, and that even long-buried actions can resurface. It underscores that accountability matters, and that time does not erase consequences. The Josh Harris story also invites reflection. It challenges us to think about our relationship with the people we admire. How much perfection do we demand from public figures? How much do we invest in the version of them we see on screen, rather than the person they really are? And how can we balance empathy for human complexity with the need for accountability? In the end, the story of Josh Harris is more than just one man's fall from grace. It's a mirror reflecting the fragile intersection of fame, secrecy, memory, and justice. It is a heartbreak not just for his family and friends, but for everyone who watched him, rooted for him, and believed in the story he represented.